Hello, everyone. Today we have one of our amazing podcasting friends taking over Like Mother, Like Murder. When we knew we were going to be taking our break and having some guest hosts, I wanted this story so badly. So I am so thankful that when I reached out, she said yes.
Yes, today's episode Takeover is by Crime to Burn, and you will be hearing part 1 of April's coverage on Kristine Bunch. Kristine spent over 17 years behind bars for a crime that she did not commit, a crime that took the life of her then 3-year-old son. Kristine was exonerated after all those years, and today you'll hear some of her story, and then we encourage you to head over to Crime to Burn to hear part 2, as well as an exclusive interview that April had with Kristine herself.
Thank you so much to April and her comical right-hand man, someone who's seen Backdraft at least twice, her husband. Be sure to go and subscribe to Crime to Burn wherever you listen to your podcasts. We will be back December 10th. Until then, we hope you enjoy today's episode takeover.
Science. It's supposed to be reliable, a solid foundation upon which to build criminal cases and ensure that the people responsible for horrific crimes are held to account. Scientific evidence is supposed to be the gold standard in terms of unimpeachable proof, and it can be. But what happens when we let junk science and investigatory tactics that are nothing more than old wives' tales into the halls of justice? I can tell you exactly what happens. A young woman loses her freedom. A mother loses her children. A family is shattered. Nearly 2 decades irrevocably stolen from an innocent woman. This is the story of Kristine Bunch and the shameful injustices she withstood at the hands of scientific mythology and outright dishonesty. The cost Kristine Bunch paid for a crime she didn't commit is inexcusable. She's been exonerated, a word that means unburdened. But after 17 years behind bars for a crime she didn't commit, I doubt she feels unburdened. I suspect that the unfair way she was treated by a system that is supposed to value truth above all else weighs heavy on her mind as she recounts those years she spent away from her family, paying a debt to society that she did not owe. Our justice system failed Kristine Bunch. Today, we'll shine a light into a dark chapter in criminal justice and tell you the story of what really happened to Kristine Bunch on Crime to Burn. Welcome to Crime to Burn, where we explore the dark city landscape where true crime intersects with arson and criminal negligence. Join us as we sift through the ashes to bring you the story of what really happened. Welcome back to Crime to Burn. I'm April, a fire protection engineer and former firefighter.
And I'm a little ray of sunshine in an overcast world.
A quick reminder to please leave us a 5-star rating wherever you listen. If you listen on a platform that allows reviews, please consider leaving us even just a short 1-sentence review. Every single review and rating goes a very long way in helping us grow. Other ways you can help us include subscribing to our YouTube channel, following us on social media, including X, Facebook, and Instagram. If you see content from us on any of those platforms, leave us a comment, tag your friend, share it with your stories, put it in your feed, whatever. Doing this helps tell the algorithm to push our content to new people and helps us grow, and that's what we really need right now. And we appreciate each and every one of you that takes the time to interact with our content to help us grow. And as always, if you have constructive feedback, fire stories, case suggestions, or information on any of the cases that we've covered, you can reach out to us at crimetoburn@gmail.com.
You got your foot right on the floor, don't you?
Yeah.
That was nice. That's some East Coast speed there. Do you think they parsed all that?
I hope so.
The people in Alabama definitely don't
they're going to have to listen. But
said.
you can adjust the speed in the podcast apps, and so they can listen to it on half speed if they need to.
You can go slower?
Yeah.
Oh.
All right, before we get into this case, a trigger warning for child death. I'm going to be as respectful as I can be, but if you would rather not hear a story that involves the death of a child, we completely understand, and we'll see you on the next case.
I'll see you all later. I'm out. Door slams here.
You don't get that option. You have to stay. I must now tell you about Kristine Bunch, a woman worthy of admiration, but not because she made all the right choices in life. Nope, Kristine would probably be the first to tell you that at 21 she had not made all the right choices. But what she was doing was being responsible for the products of those choices. And it was what happened to her and how she handled it that make her worthy of admiration. Because Kristine lived an absolute nightmare, a nightmare that would have destroyed most of us. But Kristine persevered. Kristine earned her GED, her associate's degree, and her bachelor's degree while she was incarcerated. But that's not all. She became an expert in legal issues and court procedures, and she fought without financial resources, without anyone on her team, without a reason to hope. She clung to truth, and she fought. She fought for her freedom after a wrongful conviction, and when she won it, she did not stop fighting. Nope, Kristine Bunch went on to fight for other wrongfully convicted people. And that makes Kristine Bunch a badass.
I don't mean to rabbit trail here, but how do you fight without resources?
She literally just wrote to lawyer after lawyer after lawyer explaining what she had learned about her case and asking them to help her.
That's garnering resources.
But she didn't have any to start with. She started with nothing.
Fair enough. That is badass, you're right.
But let's go back to before she learned just how strong she could be. Kristine had a bright and promising childhood near Indianapolis, Indiana. Her family owned 2 farms and a bakery. She was bright, she excelled in school, and she had a younger brother, Michael, that she adored. Kristine and Michael's parents were super busy running the bakery and farming, leaving Michael and Kristine often unsupervised. And Kristine, being older than Michael by 4 years, took on a very motherly role toward her baby brother. In one story that made me laugh, she recounts that he was sick and she wanted to give him some cough syrup because he was coughing, but she accidentally gave him Worcestershire sauce.
How old was she?
She was little. She was a little kid. She was too big to be doling out, or she was too little to be doling out medication to a younger child, but it was just funny that she gave him Worcestershire sauce.
You're never too young to dole out Worcestershire sauce. But really, how old was she about that?
Didn't tell me. I don't know.
Well, guess?
I don't know. I would guess maybe like 9 or 10.
Okay. I'm just trying to get some perspective. I don't know anything about this except something really bad happened and I should be mad.
When Kristine was in 6th grade, her happy childhood started to fall apart. This is the year that her parents divorced, and she and Michael moved with their mother to Greensburg, Indiana, about 35 miles away from where they'd been living. Now, Kristina's mother struggled financially, and Kristine struggled to fit in. She didn't make any friends in her new school, and when her mother remarried, Michael and Kristine both began to frequently skip school, and nobody really seemed to care. So by the time Kristine got to 9th grade, she had dropped out completely. Instead, she hung out with a crowd that would drink and smoke all day. She had no aspirations, no job, and her only care was watching out for her little brother. After her mom divorced for a 2nd time, her mom began dating a man that finally stepped up to become the father figure that was missing from Kristine's daily life. He reportedly set boundaries, enforced curfews, but above all else, he made sure the kids always left with a quarter and knew that no matter what happened, they could call him on a payphone and he would be right there.
Hey, don't leave without this quarter. This quarter will save your life. You can put it into a phone machine.
This is just a recount
Maybe I'll
what those of us born in the 1900s lived through.
A quarter. It sounds like a pittance, but that's nice to think about people like that. You know, I give them an option.
Well, his relationship with Kristine's mom fell apart, but he actually stayed close to the kids and continued to be a supportive role in their life. And he continued to play that role as a father figure to Kristine all the way up until the unthinkable happened.
So where does the line get drawn between what's appropriate and what's creepy in this case? Because you think about it, like, you just, like, some dude breaks up with your mom and then, like, still keeps talking to you.
Let's not cast him as creepy. So
I'm not trying to cast anybody as anything. I'm just being honest.
At the time of the fire, he was in his 60s and retired, and he babysat Kristine's baby for her every day so that she could go to school and better her life.
This guy's already deeply involved with these people.
Yeah.
That's what I suspected. I'm just trying to pull this information from you.
At the age of 17, Kristine found herself pregnant. Now, like I said, she'd already dropped out of school, and she says she didn't really mind that the baby's father didn't stick around. Apparently, he was no prize. And in March of 1992, Kristine became a mom to a baby boy named Anthony. She called him Tony. At 21 and 3, Kristine and Tony were living in a trailer in Greensburg, Indiana.
Whoa, at 21 and 3?
Yeah, Kristine was 21 and Tony was 3.
Oh, I thought you were giving like GPS coordinates. I was like, what? Where is that?
Yeah, no. At ages 21 and 3, Kristine and Tony were living in a trailer in Greensburg, Indiana. And she had stayed close with that man that had been this father figure in her life. In fact, now in his 60s, he babysat Tony while Kristine attended classes. Kristine was working her tail off. She was learning welding in hopes of being hired at a local factory where she would be eligible for benefits like health insurance that she desperately needed to help care for her toddler son. Money was tight, very tight. But Kristine was described by everyone as a doting mother. On June 29th, 1995, Kristine picked up Tony after class, fed him dinner, bathed him, read him stories, and the two had fallen asleep on the couch in the living room of their trailer. And at some point in the night, Tony had awoken and gone into the front room of their trailer, which was separate from where Kristine was sleeping on the couch.
I like this lady. She's going to weld herself out of a bad situation.
Well, Kristine woke up in the morning hours of June 30th, and she was confused. It was foggy. Her brain felt sluggish as she tried to parse what was happening. The realization that her home was on fire sent her into action. She first attempted to put out the fire between her and her son with a pillow and then with a blanket. Both efforts were unsuccessful. So she tried to find the fire extinguisher, but she couldn't find it, and the flames were growing. She was confused, likely severely hypoxic from the effects of smoke, and by the time she realized she couldn't put the fire out and the wall of flames separating her from her baby boy were impenetrable, Kristine was frantic. She ran out of the trailer to summon help, and then grabbed Tony's tricycle to break the window into the front room where she thought he was. Now, she attempted to climb into the window frame to get into the burning trailer to save her son, but as the glass broke, the fire rapidly intensified, seeming to ignite the entire room at once, and her neighbors pulled her away. They feared allowing her to enter the home would surely kill her. She escaped their grasp and ran back around to the front door to attempt to re-enter the house, but was pushed back by the flames. Her neighbors continued to hamper her efforts to get to her son because they knew allowing her to re-enter the home would result in her death. Those minutes that she waited for the fire department probably seemed like the longest minutes of Kristine's life. By the time the fire department arrived, the entire trailer was shooting flames 30 feet in the air. They put out the fire, and in total the fire was out within 30 minutes of when Kristine woke up. Now, Bunch was told that firefighters had her son as they bustled her into an ambulance where she was transported to the hospital to be treated for smoke inhalation. She also had burns from her attempts to fight the fire and reach her son. And she later recounts that she already knew in her brain that her son couldn't have survived, but the shock wouldn't let her consider that outcome. And it wasn't until she arrived at the hospital that somebody told her that her precious Tony hadn't made it. Her baby was gone. And of course, she learned this information while she's in shock. She's hypoxic. She's dealing with carbon monoxide poisoning. She's being treated for smoke inhalation and burns. But the police decided that because she didn't scream or cry or do anything at first that they thought would be appropriate right away when she learned the news, that this was unusual. And then, as the news penetrated that veil of shock and she came to the full realization of what had happened, she did cry. In fact, she cried so much that the police later said, seems like she was acting. Police already believed that Kristine Bunch had committed arson and set her home on fire, intentionally ending the life of her toddler son. But if they wanted a jury to buy it, they were going to need more than just an accusation of acting and some harebrained theories. Unless those harebrained theories could come from trusted experts. That's how you make juries believe the unlikely is credible. That's how you take fabrications constructed out of the exhalations of corrupted investigators and turn them into stone. And I'm not usually this harsh on investigators. I don't believe that most investigators would intentionally and knowingly send an innocent woman to prison, but in this case, investigators behaved in a manner so shockingly underhanded, according to allegations that I got out of court documents, that these investigators don't deserve the benefit of the doubt. They don't deserve to wear the badge. And these investigators that decided that Kristine was an arsonist and a baby killer intentionally looked at the crime scene for evidence that they could manipulate into telling the story that they fabricated. And when evidence came back from the lab that didn't match their theory, they allegedly conspired with a forensic chemist to doctor their report and make it appear that Kristine Bunch was an arsonist and a murderer. They lied in the halls of justice. They manipulated evidence. They sent an innocent woman to prison for 17 years. There are words for people like that, but I'm going to let you come up with your own words for them.
I have many synonyms if you need help.
But the facts presented here come from court documents. And if they knowingly allowed evidence to be modified to fit their theory, then they don't deserve the gift of anyone's discretion. And if I come across as mad, it's because I am mad.
You deserve the gift of my gooch on your nose.
By noon the day of the fire, investigators already had their sights set on Kristine as the arsonist and murderer of her child. At 2 p.m. that day, investigators took statements from Kristine at the hospital. Now, these are statements they took from a woman that had just lived through the horror of a house fire, being unable to reach her child, the shock of finding out he had passed away, a woman that was being treated for smoke inhalation and had suffered memory-impacting effects of carbon monoxide, and so they made her go through the entire story 3 separate times, and as they did that, some of the details of her accounts reportedly varied. And they wanted to know things like, what were the precise locations and heights of the flames, and where was Tony in the bedroom? And apparently in one of her recountings, she mentioned that she thought the hem of her nightgown had actually caught fire as she was trying to fight the fire. A nightgown that police later determined wasn't singed, and they took that as a reason to presume that she was lying about everything.
How long between the incident and the questioning of her?
About 5 or 6 hours.
Okay, I don't think that's cool at all.
No, it's not.
I don't think that's even morally okay.
Especially for somebody that's suffering from carbon monoxide effects, because carbon monoxide is...
You need 72 hours to put those thoughts in order. There's no way that 4 hours or 5 hours or whatever, 8 hours, 10 hours after a situation like that you're going to recount it correctly. You're not done dealing with it at all. You're not done dealing with it for a long time, but you're not even done recognizing what happened.
She wouldn't have even physiologically shaken off the full effects of the smoke inhalation at this point.
Whoever questioned her at that point was kind of a dick.
Yep. And carbon monoxide can affect memory. The fact that her accounts varied as she tried to recall events doesn't surprise me at all, but investigators took this as a sure sign she was lying. She told police that she thought the hem of her nightgown may have caught on fire at one point, but when they looked at the nightgown, it wasn't singed, so they took that as reason to believe that everything she said was a lie. Now, she was later released from the hospital, and at 10 p.m. that night, the police called her down to the station for more questioning.
A further dick move. What the fuck, man?
She reported to the police station
That's harassment.
It was. But she reported to the police station barefoot because she had lost everything in the fire and she didn't have any shoes.
Jesus Christ.
So the interview ended up being so stressful for Kristine that she left in tears and told her family that she didn't ever want to meet alone with the police again.
You motherfuckers are lucky she didn't hurt herself.
Kristine spent the next several days in a fog of grief, making plans to bury her child. And police made plans to pin the fire on her. They even reportedly attended the funeral services, watching Kristine, judging her, while she laid her child to rest.
Now, this makes me just sad that these people share my f***ing air.
The firefighter that had retrieved Tony's body from the fire reported to investigators that the door to his bedroom had been obstructed. Now, he believed that a chair was the likely culprit put across the child's door. Fire investigators determined that burn patterns on the floor indicated an accelerant had been poured on the floor and identified that there were multiple points of origin, which is a common thing that you see in arsons. People tend to not light arsons in one spot. They tend to light multiple fires.
That's more effective, efficient.
They suspected that Kristine had used a gas can they found outside the trailer to pour accelerant around the living room and around the room where Tony was sleeping to light the fire. Now, I've talked in some of my Instagram reels in the past about arson investigation myths, and unfortunately, this is a case of an investigator being taught a falsehood as fact. He identified burn patterns he was taught to believe were signs of an accelerant. You see, when you pour an accelerant on the floor, it can leave an irregularly shaped burn pattern. However, these types of irregular burn patterns can be caused in other ways also. Another cause of these types of patterns is flashover. And we have reports from eyewitnesses that when the window to the room was broken, the fire rapidly intensified and the entire room was on fire. That is flashover. For those of you that don't understand flashover, in a fire, it's not solids that burn. The solids vaporize. Those vapors come off the solids, they mix with oxygen, and once a fire grows large enough such that all of the fuel load in a room begins off-gassing together and mixes with oxygen in the right concentrations, it can all sort of ignite at once. And to a layman viewing flashover, it's sort of the transition point between when someone might say, there's a fire in that room, to saying that room is on fire. If you've seen a video of a room on fire, you know what I'm talking about. It sort of looks like even the smoke is on fire and pouring out of the room. And it is deadly and intense, and it's an important transition point in a compartment fire.
You know, sometimes when you get your picture taken, you see a little red light, and then the flash. Mm-hmm. That's the difference.
Yeah.
You can see it's happening, right? But then, bam, it does. There's no mistaking that.
There's no mistaking it. So we know that once the window to the room where Tony was sleeping broke, the fire instantaneously intensified and flames were shooting out of the windows all of a sudden. So this indicates to us that this fire has reached a flashover state. Now, flashover can cause those irregularly shaped burn patterns on the floor. The deal is that flashover usually involves a lot of fire at the ceiling level. All those gases ignite at once, and because of the intense and sudden radiant heating, they can radiate heat downwards and create irregularly shaped burn patterns on the floor. So the same kinds of burn patterns can be interpreted completely differently before flashover and after flashover.
There's a different duration of involvement, right?
Yes.
If you saw an accelerant, you'd see immediate involvement, and there's going to be a delay in the flash.
Well, even a fire started by accelerant can go to flashover, but you might not.
Right, but it's going to be faster, right?
It might be. It just depends on the accelerant they use. But the deal is that if you see irregularly shaped burn patterns in a room that hasn't gone to flashover, there's still other things you need to look at before you decide that those are accelerant patterns. But after flashover, you cannot rely on irregularly shaped burn patterns as positive proof of an accelerant.
Yeah, because it makes a mess of carbon and stuff, right?
Yeah, the other thing that can cause these irregularly shaped burn patterns is when things fall from the ceiling. In fires, ceilings burn. They can fall down and create irregularly shaped burn patterns, or things like bookshelves and stuff can flip over and spill things on the floor that can burn. And then another thing that can create irregularly shaped burn patterns is plastics and polyurethanes. And most of the furnitures and mattresses and things we use now are full of polyurethane foam. And polyurethane tends to melt before it burns. So it'll melt and create a pool on the floor and then ignite, creating burn patterns that look just like accelerant type burn patterns. So investigators can't just look at an irregularly shaped pattern and make a determination. You have to look at so many other aspects of the fire. And once flashovers occurred, a lot of those signature things about a fire become completely unusable because there's so many other things that can cause them that you have to really understand fire dynamics and the physics of fire to be able to pick apart what's left after a fire and make a concrete determination. So there's another important thing to remember when we talk about the sudden intensification of the fire when the window was broken. This indicates another really important transition in the fire. Because there is a sudden inrush of oxygen that allowed this fire to intensify so drastically, that means that this is a point where we transitioned from an oxygen-limited fire to a fuel-limited fire. And this is why firefighters are very careful about where and how they ventilate a fire. Ideally, in a fire, we want as much ventilation as possible because the more heat and smoke we can release, the better the visibility, the safer it is to fight the fire with interior attack methods. However, if you ventilate an oxygen-limited fire, you will cause a sudden intensification of the fire. And this is why firefighters often carefully choose where they ventilate a fire, especially if they know that there may still be someone inside, because the fire will move toward the ventilation path. So if they know where victims are, they may choose to ventilate areas remote from where they believe the victim is, to try to pull the products of combustion away from that compartment. So let's talk about a ventilation limited fire for a minute, because I think most people don't really understand what happens in a fire. So if we have a burning compartment, the fire will ignite, flames and heat from the fire heat up other fuels to the point that they vaporize. That vapor mixes with oxygen into a combustible concentration and then will flame. Now, if you have too rich of an environment, which is where you have too much fuel vapor because there's a lot of heat, but there's not enough oxygen mixed in, it will have the effect of smothering the fire. And it can completely smother it out, but more typically in a house fire where there's still some oxygen getting in, it'll go into a smoldering state. Now, you may have seen this if you have a fireplace with a glass doors on it or a wood stove. When you fill up the burn compartment and the wood is burning and then you choke down the air, the fire slows way down and you'll get like a long, slow smoldering. But then when you open it again to add wood in and you get that sudden inrush of oxygen, sometimes you'll get that sort of poof of flames. And that's what happened when they broke the window to the boys' room. So we had a oxygen-limited fire, and now it has all of this oxygen available to it, and it becomes a fuel-limited fire, meaning it will burn until either someone puts it out or it runs out of fuel.
Just like backdraft.
Similar to backdraft. In a fuel-limited fire, that would be where we have a compartment that's constantly allowing enough fresh air to mix in with the fuel vapors. And so it's only limited by the amount of fuel available. Now, this is interesting in this case because in Kristine's accounts of the fire, in all the accounts I could find, she woke up and it was foggy, and it took her a minute to realize that it was smoke, and then she sees flames after she wakes up. Now, we know the ceiling collapsed, and I don't know exactly where in the timeline that the ceiling collapsed, but we're going to find out later from new fire experts brought in to look at the case that they believe the fire initially started in the ceiling of the trailer, possibly an electrical fire. And the area above the ceiling and below the roof of the trailer, it's not very large. And it makes sense to me that if the fire started there, it would have likely gone to a smoldering fire for a long time until it finally was heated up the structure holding up the ceiling enough that it allowed it to collapse. Now, the thing is, most people don't realize this. The ceiling of a trailer is not usually gypsum board. It's usually these thin panels. They can be metal. Sometimes they're sort of a laminated type of more robust cardboard type of material. It would have burned through and collapsed faster than if it was a gypsum board ceiling. So when the ceiling collapsed in one area, we would have seen a sudden, intense flaming, similar to what we saw when the window broke, but on a smaller scale, as air entered that ceiling area from the living compartment. And as those burning materials fell to the floor, they would have flared up. However, this means that the fire would have been pumping carbon monoxide into these compartments where Kristine and Tony were sleeping for probably a good long while. So Kristine's waking up in
a box of burning ass.
Right, but she wakes up miraculously, even in the absence of smoke detectors. And I don't know for sure that she didn't have smoke detectors, but in none of the accounts I read did they indicate the presence of smoke detectors. So I believe there was no smoke detectors.
Have you ever seen a smoke detector in a trailer?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. I mean, we probably had some stuck up there, but like...
Yeah, I used to babysit for a family that lived in a trailer, and they had smoke detectors. I know this because the battery got low one day, right about nap time, when I was really looking forward to putting the baby down for a nap. And the smoke detector decided, now's my time.
Well, smoke detectors always go off inappropriately at the right times.
All right, so I don't know if they had smoke detectors. So if they didn't, then the fact that Kristine woke up at all is miraculous because of the amount of carbon monoxide that would have been infiltrating the interior compartments of the trailer during this fire. So by the time she wakes up, she's suffering from severe confusion from hypoxia and carbon monoxide. It would have been really intense. And I'm really impressed that she even had enough wherewithal and adrenaline dump to try to fight the fire at all at first, or look for the fire extinguisher, even though she couldn't find it. And I think a lot of people might look at her and say, why didn't she just get to the baby first instead of trying to fight the fire? But I want you to remember, she fell asleep with him on the couch, and he got up while she was asleep and went into the front room. Now, in some accounts, she reportedly told police she thought he was in the front room, but nowhere does she say she was absolutely sure he was in the front room, and she could have been wrong. So I don't think that her actions here are completely illogical, and I think they can absolutely be explained by the hypoxia that she was suffering from. He could have been elsewhere in the trailer.
I don't disagree with that a bit.
So the flames are growing now, because if my theory that this started in the ceiling and then the ceiling collapsed holds true, the fire now has the remaining oxygen inside the trailer living space to use, and that's why she describes it as suddenly there was a wall of fire between her and the baby. However, these flames are going to quickly use up the oxygen available in the trailer, and just like in a wood stove, they're going to go down to smoldering, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to be, that doesn't mean that the conditions are any more tenable, because the room's going to be full of thick, black, oily smoke. You're not going to be able to see. And remember that the way a wood stove works is it's intended to smolder for a long period of time because of how hot smoldering is. So you're not going to get a relief from the flames.
You know, I've been involved in a lot of fires, and, you know, I've kicked open doors and done stuff. Those weren't a flash room. Mm-hmm. They weren't. They were just on fire. They're just on fire. It's different. Like, it's like a birthday candle next to hell or something.
It is. And I think a lot of people think that the fact that the fire flashed over after she broke the window means that the conditions inside the house were tenable. They would not have been tenable. We basically would have already had a very sort of small flashover in the above ceiling area when the ceiling first collapsed. And that's what she was likely dealing with when she exited the trailer and tried to get back in from the outside.
I've seen those conditions, but not like right in my face, right? So all I can do is imagine. It's way different than looking over a flaming wall or a flaming doorway or something. It's like looking right at the devil's dick.
Yeah. So this fire has suddenly gone to flaming for her. So she runs to get her friend that babysits Tony and wake him up to get help. And the fire may have started to die down to smoldering here. And then they break the window, and that's when they get all of that inrush of oxygen that mixes with all of that fuel that's been off-gassing. And that's when we get that flashover. The fire seems to burst out of the windows, and Kristine is still trying to get in and get to Tony, but her neighbors, they were right to prevent her from getting back into that window because she surely would have been killed. And it's worth mentioning that the fire investigators were once taught that you can always tell the point of origin in a fire by determining where the most damage occurred. However, scientific tests have proven that this is not the case. What determines a fire's intensity in a specific location is heavily influenced by ventilation pathways available to the fire. In one study, researchers set compartments on fire with a ventilation opening like a window or a door, and in each case, the fire was started away from the window or door, but in every single incident, the most damage occurred directly opposite of that ventilation opening. And because we know that once the window broke, the fire flashed over, it's likely that the investigators' theories that multiple points of origin, which included points of origin in the child's room, were completely false. That this was just a result of the flashover and the massive influx of oxygen that occurred. Now, I'm happy to report that fire investigators have come a long way, and we have a better understanding of what's myth and what's backed up by fact. That doesn't mean that there aren't some areas where maybe some of these old myths still live healthy lives, but they're being squashed out, and yay.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that should have been a major importance here and to fire investigators was the medical reports about Tony's death. If Tony had died of thermal injuries, then it's much more likely that the investigators' theories that Kristine put accelerant in his room and ignited it might have been plausible. But if Tony's airways weren't burned, then that would have indicated that he ceased breathing before his room was really hot and had flames that could reach him. But the original trial court, from what I could find, and I don't have the court records, so I'm reading reports and I'm reading the reports from appeals, but it doesn't appear that the original trial court addressed Tony's cause of death in the trial. Yes.
And I'm sure you're going to get the motive.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's next.
I'm positively awaiting the motive.
Okay. So I know I'm doing a lot of surmising here, and we're going to get to evaluate my analysis of the events of the fire because we are going to be talking about what experts determined as they worked to exonerate Kristine. I wrote this portion that we just went through of the case before I read the expert reports because I wanted to form my own opinions about what I could glean and what would have been important before I read what the experts found, because I don't have access to all the photos and all of the data that they have.
Fair enough.
But fire investigators were certain that this fire was arson, and that because the firefighter that retrieved Tony's body from the front room reported that he ran into an obstruction, they believed their working theory was that Kristine had poured accelerant in the living room and the front room, lit multiple fires, and intentionally blockaded the door to Tony's room so he couldn't escape. However, like you said, the ceiling of the front room collapsed, and I don't get a clear picture from any of the discussions of the evidence exactly when it collapsed, but I suspect that the debris that the firefighter actually had to crawl through, because when you're in a fire like that, you cannot see. You can't.
You can't see nothing, dude. I don't care if you have a visor on. There's no visibility.
I suspect that what he actually crawled over was probably that collapsed ceiling, and later they found a chair in the debris. But remember that a chair in the debris could have been there at the time of the fire. It could have been put there after the fire during overhaul operations. It could have been moved there by fire hoses. It could have been knocked there by the ceiling falling down. Like, there's so many explanations for a chair being near the area of the doorway.
Yeah.
Now, 5 days after the fire, Kristine realizes that they're going to be accusing her of killing her son, and so she goes to the police and requests to take a polygraph test to prove her innocence.
Oh, she requested it?
Mm-hmm. Now, in the polygraph test, the person administering the test asked her if she set the blaze, and she denied that she set it. But later in the test, he told her, "Well, I don't believe that you told the truth about not setting the fire, and so why did you do it?" Now, she's 21. She's scared. She's upset. She's grieving. She's probably at this point horrified that this guy has given her the impression that she exhibited some sort of negative response on the question of whether or not she set the fire.
Dude, that motherfucker needs a negative elbow.
So what she said was, "I don't know. I don't remember doing it." And that was enough of a confession for the police to feel certain that they had their arsonist.
Jesus Christ.
Everything about this investigation was unethical. Everything. What was Kristine's alleged motive? Well, they said that she was young and overwhelmed at being a mom, and she didn't want to be a mom anymore, so she intentionally set this fire to kill her son. Now, no one in Kristine's life corroborated this assertion that she was tired of being a mom. Not one person.
This guy's gonna get a negative Smecker award. A not Smecker.
But police said that they had interviewed one of Kristine's friends, and she told them that Kristine had asked her the year prior to the fire to take custody of Tony.
I'm sorry, who's Tony?
The baby.
Yeah.
But again, this would prove to be nothing more than an investigator twisting the truth. The friend actually cleared up this assertion in court, but the police continued to push the narrative that Kristine was fed up with being a irresponsible mother, and money was really tight, and she was working too hard, and it was a lot for a 21-year-old that had dropped out of school in 9th grade, and she just wanted to go back to doing whatever she wanted and partying it up with her friends instead of making different decisions. Now, the question also came up of whether or not there could be a financial motive, but the answer was no. Kristine didn't have life insurance on Tony. She didn't have insurance on the trailer. She didn't even have car insurance. There was no financial benefit to her setting her home on fire. But police arrested Kristine, and she sat in jail for 4 months, grieving her son in the Decatur County lockup. Now, she describes these days as incredibly bleak. She says she didn't care if she woke up or not. And Kristine was assigned a public defender, and finally, after 4 months in lockup, she was released on bond to await trial.
That is brutal. That makes me angry.
While she was out on bond, Kristine, struggling to cope with what had become of her life and trying to cope with the death of her baby and the fact that she was facing a murder trial and being accused of being an arsonist, she admits that during this time she self-medicated with alcohol and other substances, and I don't think anyone can really blame her.
You better not or face me.
And she met a man and had a fling, only to find out later that he was married, but he had gotten her pregnant during that fling. So now she's awaiting trial on murder and arson charges, and she's pregnant. Now, it seems like a really bad situation to be in, but Kristine credits her second son with giving her the will to fight for justice. And not just that, it gave her a reason to live and not give up. And so she said that this child that she never intended to create ended up saving her life.
Hell yeah.
Now, the prosecutor came to Kristine and offered to drop the murder charge in exchange for Kristine pleading guilty to arson. In return, she would accept a 15-year sentence. But remember, Kristine has just found out she's pregnant, and she believed that the truth would prevail. She had not set this fire, and she has this new baby to consider. Could she realistically give up the first 15 years of his life and not be there? So she decided to go to trial. But remember, she's a single mother, a high school dropout. She's living in a trailer park. And in the court of public opinion, no one was really on her side. Because in 1995, when Kristine's trial began, the year before Kristine's trial began, the court of public opinion was massively swayed by a hugely important court case. You see, the year before Kristine's trial, Susan Smith had been on trial. Susan Smith was a South Carolina woman all over the front pages of news nationwide in the infamous case where she killed her own children. Add to all these cards seemingly stacked against Kristine the fact that her public defender never once been involved in a murder trial, not as a prosecutor, not as a defender. And that's not all. There's one more huge strike coming. 2 days before her trial began, newspapers in the county ran a front page story that said, Bunch told David Motzinger of the Indiana State Police during an interview that she, quote, didn't know, unquote, why she had started the fire.
You small town need to start checking your facts way more closely.
So they took the statement she had made in the polygraph when she was told that they believed she was being dishonest, and they took it out of context and used it to plaster on the front page to say that she was guilty. Despite the odds stacked against her, Kristine went to trial beginning February 26, 1996. In the prosecution's opening statements, they told the jury that they were not going to be presenting a motive because motive wasn't required for a murder conviction. And we're going to be talking a lot more...
Whoa! What the f*** did you just say?
Okay, let me try that again. In the prosecution's opening statements, they told the jury that they wouldn't be presenting a motive because motive wasn't required for a murder conviction.
No, I heard you. Why is motive not... That's not true, right?
Well, I wanted to talk about that. So we talked about in the David Crawford case that the prosecution argued that we don't have to understand someone's motive to believe that they had motive, right? Like, we don't have to agree that whatever they saw as their motive would make sense to us as motive to commit murder.
Understand and relate are not the same term.
Exactly. But the question that
you can understand something, it'd be so far removed from whatever you would think of. You could still get it, but be like, shame.
So, in later appeals, Kristine said that the fact that the prosecution said that and that the jury instructions included that the prosecution didn't have to prove motive shifted...
They have to prove motive, right?
They have to present motive. It's up to the jury to decide if they proved it or not.
Right. Well, that's whether they proved it or not is whether they believe it, right?
So you could go to a jury without a motive. You could. If you had concrete evidence, like there's a video and 900 people saw the guy do it.
We don't know why he did it, but look, here. Watch him doing it.
But in a case like this, I think motive matters. So in appeals, Kristine pointed out that by telling the jury they didn't have to consider motive, it reduced the burden of proof that the state is bound to. And I kind of agree that if you tell the jury, hey, look, we've got means and... Was it motive, means, and...
Opportunity.
Thank you. We've got means and opportunity, and we don't have to prove motive to you. In a case like this, I do think it reduces the burden on the prosecution inappropriately. But we'll be talking about this more in later
episodes.
Dig
that in certain circumstances, right? That makes sense. It does.
But not in this one.
No. Like, it wasn't... so many things weren't even, like...
And maybe lawyers would have a different perspective on this, and feel free to reach out to me, crimetoburn@gmail.com.
Who put the blinders on the investigators? That's kind of what I want to know at this point. That's a bigger investigation, maybe.
Sounds like they put them on themselves.
That's the worst kind, right? The worst kind of delusion is the one you just accept willingly.
All right. So during the trial, the prosecution, they called the firefighter that testified that the chair was blocking the room door where the toddler was. They highlighted the inconsistencies in Kristine's statements to police immediately following the fire. And the thing is that her defense attorney failed to point out in court that exposure to carbon monoxide causes confusion and memory loss. It's a huge failing, if you ask me.
Who doesn't know that?
Now, the police said that this friend of Kristine's had told them that Kristine offered her friend custody of Tony the year before the fire. Well, this friend testified on behalf of the defense, and she clarified her statements. What she said was, the year before, Kristine had been having a really hard time, and she went to this friend and said, look, if something happens to me, will you and your husband take custody of Tony? She was looking to make sure that her child was taken care of in the event that something ever happened to her. Also, a bunch of people testified at trial that Kristine was a doting mother, that she had never given any indication that she didn't want to be a mother or was tired of being a mother or any of that. Kristine did tell her attorney that she didn't feel emotionally stable enough to testify at trial, and he agreed. So she did not take the stand in her own defense, which is her constitutional right. And Kristine, when she talks about that trial, she talks about being so emotionally bereft that she says she wasn't even paying attention during most of the trial. Like, she just was sitting there going through the motions.
I dissociate during this podcast, and it ain't involving me.
Now, the most damning piece of evidence that the prosecution presented was the report produced by a forensic chemist from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. In this report, the chemist indicated that he found traces of a heavy petroleum distillate in the samples that were taken from both the living room floor as well as the floor of the room where Tony passed.
So is it plastic?
Well, the defense didn't have the samples independently tested. They didn't hire a forensic chemist to refute the claims of the report. But the defense attorney did bring in their own fire investigator that testified that he disagreed with the fire marshal's office and he believed the cause of the fire was electrical and it started up in the ceiling. Now, the jury deliberated and ultimately came to the unanimous decision that Kristine was guilty of arson and felony murder. A month later, during sentencing, the judge specifically criticized Kristine for, quote, intentionally getting pregnant, unquote, to attempt to garner support. And he sentenced her to 60 years in prison. At the age of 22, Kristine, 6 months pregnant, was transferred to the Indiana Women's Prison. But Kristine was actually innocent. And that expert from the ATF, he'd allegedly colluded with investigators to lie in court and in his report. And we're going to get into exactly what that false testimony he gave was and how it finally came to light on the next episode as we get into Kristine's fight to be exonerated on Crime to Burn.
No, I don't think I should have something that nice.
Am I in your way now?
Yeah, but it feels better.
It feels real nice. Just as
Sounds awful, let's do it.
alien abductees. Apparently, I'm going to be an astronaut.
What are you talking about?
You're
Blah, 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 slow, too slow to read. Sounded sparkly. My beard is a home for many birds and other species, sometimes mammals.
Our on-air light's not on. We can't work like this.
She's pretending to be innocent. She knows the innuendo to which I was referring.
Oh, that's better.
Yeah, now we can get down to business.
Now it feels right.
Don't ever do that again. I only said that because you won't let me make the fava bean sound. Slightly intoxicated, but not hypoxic.
So by
Gooch. My oxygen, mine. Door fart.
Skinny Chad's friends coming out to play. What were you going to say?
I remember. Hey, here's a PSA. The air fryer setting on your stove, it's not the same as a regular air fryer. Don't put bacon in there.
Don't put bacon in your stove on air fryer. But the one time we did that, all the smoke detectors on the ground floor of our house went off. And so me, being the smart woman that I am, I grabbed all of them and ran outside with them to try to clear them
This is
out.
so hilarious.
So the front door of the house is open. Smoke's like pouring out of the front door of the house.
It's not like an involved.
It's not like an involved fire, but there was definitely some
You can tell
steamy
from the road,
smoke
right?
coming
Yeah.
out of the front door of the house. And I'm holding 2 screaming smoke detectors. And it just so happens that at that moment, the one set of neighbors that lives at the end of our street that I've never met before happened to be on a walk and walk into view. And me, for some stupid reason, I was like, hide the smoke detectors. And so I hid them behind my back. So I was standing there for inexplicably with 2 screaming smoke detectors behind my back.
Everything's normal here. Nothing's
Smiling
going
like
on.
everything's
Nothing's
normal.
going on.
And I'm just like, hey, how are you? And then
They're like,
they looked,
one eyebrow up. We're good. How are you?
So concerned. And I just stood there with smoke detectors behind my back. And then finally I realized I was not actually doing a good job of hiding anything because they're still screaming. And so I just gave up and started waving the smoke detectors around again. So our neighbor's first introduction to us was me standing outside waving a couple of screaming smoke detectors around frantically. So there you go.
No, honestly, it sounds appropriate. That's kind of like your thing. Run around outside, run around outside with some smoke detectors, flailing about, making a spectacle of yourself. That's like a metaphor for this podcast. Can I apologize and redeem myself at this point?
Yeah.
Like as a person?
Yeah.
If you could drool a little bit when
Okay.
you say that. Don't lick your teeth, just drool. Balls. Yeah, I think we should bomb rush them. No, I think we should absolutely invade them as thoroughly as possible. Don't touch that.
Why can't I touch it? Thermite's different.
From Clearwater, but it would probably, the tip of it might just barely touch Key West.
Hasn't Florida been through enough in the past few months?
I think my work's done here today. No, it ain't.
Don't wait. Don't take your smoke detectors on a walk.
Attention, good people of the world. Are you experiencing sudden, unexplainable accusations? You may be a victim of false accusation syndrome. Not every misplaced sock, stolen pen, or missing slice of pie is an international conspiracy. It could be. I can tell, followed by intense eye contact. Blame the ghost. Blame the dog. Blame the solar flares, the alignment of the planets, or if all else fails, mumble something about parallel universe where this totally happened. Unless someone actually believes you're plotting world domination because of a coffee spill. Jumping to conclusions is the only cardio some people get. Offer them a tinfoil hat. Innocent until proven munching on someone else's pizza. Here's a really long go yourself.
It's going to be a lot of ducks.
I feel good about this one. Because of my stamina. I don't know what to say right now. I feel like a little girl.
You made the noise. All right.
Sorry, it's compulsory. I'm working on it.
I love you.
I love you.
Let's log off.